Since we've been focusing on poetry during this series, let's start off with a little poetry quiz. So get your high school English minds into this question. How many of you, the first question is just yes or no. How many of you know the phrase, "I know why the caged bird sings"? How many of you know the source of the phrase, "I know why the caged bird sings"? What's the source? Maya Angelou. The title of Maya Angelou's autobiography. Are there any other answers? Because that is not the source. Because that's what everybody who knows the phrase, that's where we know it from. The title of Maya Angelou's autobiography. But it's a phrase from a poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, who we just heard a minute ago, Maya Angelou reading his poem about the mask that was paired with her poem. But I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is from the third stanza of a Dunbar poem called Sympathy. I know why the caged bird sings, ah me, when his wing is bruised and his bosom sore. When he beats his bars and he would be free, it is not a carol of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core, but a plea that upward to heaven he flings. I know why the caged bird sings. Paul Laurence Dunbar was born in 1872. Both of his parents had been enslaved. His father, in fact, escaped from slavery in the state of Kentucky, made his way north, and served in the Union Army during the war between the states. His mother was emancipated, and she actually taught herself to read so that she could help with her son's education, reading to him and helping him learn how to read and how to write. The Dunbar family, just as not relevant to the sermon in as much as it's just a bit of trivia, the Dunbar family were Methodists. In fact, the Dunbar family were members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME Church, the denomination that divided from the Methodist Church because the Methodist Church wanted to keep owning people, enslaving people, and so the African Methodist Episcopal Church said, nope, we're not going to do that. So they became their own church. That part of our Methodist tradition, the denomination still exists today. Dunbar began writing as a child. In those lessons with his mom, he was already writing. He was creating poems. He was writing stories. In fact, he became the editor of his high school newspaper and the president of his high school's literary club. The newspaper that he edited was printed there in the high school by another classmate of his, whose name happens to be Orville Wright. Maybe you've heard of him. He was classmates with Paul Laurence Dunbar there in Dayton, Ohio, as he experienced his beginnings of his writing career. He published 4 novels, in fact. He published 4 collections of short stories and 12 books of poetry. But his life was cut short. He died at age 33 in 1906. He died of tuberculosis. And so at the end of his life was pretty kind of troubled. However, his influence is immense. He's one of those rare poets that was very well respected in their lifetime, and also their writing and their reputation lingers beyond them. I mean, if Maya Angelou uses a line of your poem for her autobiography, I think you've made a pretty good impression. Paul Laurence Dunbar wrote these poetic and vivid descriptions of life for Black people in the years immediately following the Civil War, and it gives us a glimpse into that experience in a very beautiful way, including in this Sunday's theme poem, We Wear the Mask. I am not going to try to read it like Maya Angelou did, but just as a reminder, it's also on the back of your bulletin. We Wear the Mask by Paul Laurence Dunbar. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts, we smile and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh, great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet, and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. The metaphor of the mask is here used by Dunbar to describe the concept of double consciousness. Double consciousness was popularized by W.E.B. Du Bois in his 1903 essay, The Souls of Black Folk, where the mask was published in 1895, so right about the same time period, although Dunbar predates Du Bois. When he writes about double consciousness, Du Bois is writing about the idea of always seeing yourself through the eyes of other people. So the double consciousness is the conscious awareness of who you are, but also the simultaneous conscious awareness of how others perceive you and who others think you are. And specifically, Dunbar and Du Bois are writing here about how a member of a marginalized group of people is forced to see themselves as the members of the dominant group see them. They don't have a choice. It's not safe for them to be otherwise. Their heart is broken underneath the mask of smiles and grins that they put forth to the world. Another way to say that is the oppressed are always aware of the way that the oppressor sees them, but there's no need for an oppressor to ever be aware of how the oppressed see them. Du Bois says it this way: it is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. That constant awareness of the way that others see you erodes your own sense of self-awareness over time. Dunbar would say here, nay, only let them see us while we wear the mask, because it is then an act of self-preservation and protection to put that mask on. You say to yourself, I will allow you to see what I want you to see here, because allowing you to see my true self would not be safe for me. Allowing you to see my true self would be harmful for me. So even though it breaks my heart to do so, I'm only going to let you see what I want you to see. Yes, it is just a facade. Yes, it is just a mask, but it is the mask that I am choosing to show you in this moment. Dunbar's mask that he describes in this poem is a metaphorical creation of generation upon generation of enslavement and racial injustice and a culture of antipathy and white supremacy that impacted every single minute of his life. And so he wears the mask. Now, there's clearly a moral ambiguity in this poem, because wearing the mask breaks his heart, but it saves his life. The one who is wearing the mask may indeed grieve the hiddenness of their true self, but at the same time, they are in control of just how much of themselves they will show to the world. So there's a mask being worn in today's scripture story as well. In this conversation between Jesus and this woman from Samaria. I love this painting, by the way, Samaritana by Julio Romero de Torres. It was painted in 1920. And I know you can't see the details super well from where you are, but this woman is just staring right at you with an expression on her face like, "Are you kidding me?" And Jesus is pleading with her. He's talking about living water. He wants to get in there. He wants to offer her this gift, and she's hasn't quite said yes at this point. She's wearing a mask, you see. And she has to, because it's not safe for her to take it off here. There are generations of antipathy and animosity and tension between the Jews and the Samaritans by this point in time. The Jewish people and the Samaritans were once united. They were once one group, and generations ago they became two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Samaria, the southern kingdom of Judea. And it's the woman herself who in this story names that animosity. How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? There are other places that this animosity appears in the Gospels, places that are alarming to read, including Matthew 10, when Jesus is sending the disciples out into the world to spread the good news, but he gives them specific instructions not to go into any towns of Samaria. Do not enter a Samaritan town, says Jesus Christ to his disciples. There's another place in Luke chapter 9. Luke tells us about a Samaritan town that will not receive Jesus and his disciples as they come by. And James and John, in response to being shunned by this town, ask Jesus if they should therefore destroy the entire town. I kid you not. Their question is, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" So to say that there's a little animosity between Jewish people and Samaritan people might be an understatement. And it needs to be said, this is not a rivalry of equal parties. That's not like two equal ethnic groups that both equally kind of hate each other. It's not like Cardinals fans and Cubs fans. That's a terrible comparison to make here. This is a powerful group, the Jewish group, and a relatively smaller and relatively weaker group, the Samaritan group. A centralized group in this context, the Jewish people, and a marginalized group, the Samaritan people. Just a few years prior to this encounter, the armies of Judea had invaded Samaria and destroyed their temple and destroyed their capital city. The Samaritan people who had built a temple on top of Mount Gerizim, a sacred space for their people, the space where Jacob's well was because it was a space where Abraham's altar had been, was the site of their temple. And the Judean army had come and burned it to the ground. They had a scriptural dispute among them. The Samaritan people recognized Torah as scripture, but did not recognize the prophets. This, in the Judeans' mind, was anathema. And there was an ethnic dispute as well. When the Samaritan people had been conquered by Assyria, the Samaritan people had married with Assyrians, and so the Jewish people considered the ethnicity to be diluted and impure. The Jewish people considered their purity to be better. And so this is a glimpse into the conflict that was present here, represented in these two people encountering one another at the well. And it just, as a kind of a sidebar, that's just one small glimpse of the complicated relationship among different ethnic groups in this region of our world. In Southwest Asia, how there have been generations upon generations of these kinds of conflicts among people. It's been happening for literally thousands of years, which is one of the many reasons that United States military action in this area is not going to fix anything. It's only going to make it worse. Our military, and I'm not saying anything about the military personnel at this point, but rather about the oligarchs who make the decisions but have no risk involved. Their decisions are short-sighted. They are narrowly focused. They are kind of clumsy, ham-fisted, and it's not going to help. It has been thousands of years, and it's not going to get better just because your army can blow stuff up. Again, if you don't like your preacher being political, feel free to send me an email. Remember, my email address is jerry.blackwell@maplewoodumc.org. But back to the sermon. That's just one small glimpse into this conflict, this religious conflict, this ethnic conflict, but that's not it, right? Because there's also gender at play in this story. There's another mask that this woman is wearing. It's the mask of gender. That's why we don't even know what this woman's name was, because John didn't think it was important enough to tell us the name of a woman in this story. Should we call her Sarah? Sarah has a mask on for a lot of reasons. We're told later in the story that the disciples return, and this is the quote, they are astonished that he was talking to a woman. If you want to look that up, chapter 4, verse 27. They're not astonished at what they were talking about. They're not astonished that it's a Samaritan. And there's nothing in the Jewish religion that forbids a man from talking to a woman in a public place. So this is not a religious observation. They're astonished that he's talking to a woman based out of pure, simple misogyny. They are astonished that he's talking to a woman of Samaria. Is it any wonder that she's wearing a mask here? Can we blame her for wanting to have this mask on, the place where it is safe for her? The oppressed are always aware of how the oppressor sees them. You can hear the mask in this conversation, right? Jesus shows up at the well and just asks for a drink. Can I have a drink of water? And the mask is on, but how is it you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? And that's when Jesus responds, but if you only knew who it was asking you for a drink, you would ask me and I would give you this living water. And the mask stays in place. No, you would not, because you don't even have a bucket. How are you going to get the water? You don't have a bucket. And then he says, just if the water that I provide for you, it's magic water, I guess, because when you drink it, you'll never be thirsty again. And her response here is, then give me this water so I'll never be thirsty again. Now, the traditional interpretation of that response is that this was her moment of conversion. Like she's like, oh, I guess he does have a point. But what has he said really to convince her at this point? Nothing. So what if a different interpretation is actually better? You know, we don't get the benefit of tone of voice when we're reading the Bible. So what if this is a sarcastic comment? I mean, doesn't it work? So Jesus says, but this water that I'm going to give you is magic. You'll never ever be thirsty again. All right then, give me that water so I'll never be thirsty again, or whatever. It's just as easy for me to interpret it that way as the other way, because why would she be taking off her mask so quickly? She doesn't know this guy. She doesn't know if this guy is safe. And in fact, I mean, he goes on, all right, so why don't you go invite your husband? That's his next line of reasoning. Now, having heard that, do you think the mask is coming off any quicker? Why don't you go get your husband? I don't have a husband, she says. And now Jesus says something This was not in today's reading, but it happens just a little bit later. Now he says something that catches her attention, finally, because he says, you're right. You're not married right now. You've been married 5 times in your life, haven't you? And she knows at this point that he can see beneath the mask, but she's not taking it off. I guess you're a prophet then. I guess you're a prophet, but I got some more for you. You recognize a little bit about my life. You must be a prophet. But so your people, they say worship in Jerusalem. My people say worship here on the top of this mountain. Mask is still on. We're still divided. I'm still only showing you what I want you to see. Jesus says, yep, that's true, but a day is coming when we'll all worship together. And she says, I know that day is coming. I know Messiah is coming. I know that. And he says, it's me. I'm the Messiah. I'm here. And the thing about this story that is so amazing is that we don't know how she felt about that. We still don't know if this Samaritan woman, this Sarah at the well, it took her mask off at that point, because just then, here come the disciples. Hey, why are you talking to a woman over there? And so she leaves, and she goes to the town. When she goes to the town, she talks to her friends and her neighbors, and she says, there's this guy at the well. I think there's something, like he told me some stuff about my life that he wouldn't have known. And so the people come to see for themselves. They invite Jesus to stay, and there's this moment that they have together. But we never know if Sarah took off her mask. We never know if she felt safe enough to do so. We never knew anything about what happened next. Jesus saw her behind her mask. Jesus saw her and didn't ask her to take it off, you notice? He just said something to her that let her know that he could see her, that he knew her, but he never asked her to remove it. Just let her know that he loved her, mask and all. The mask was her refuge, not from Jesus as much as from generations of antipathy and hatred. She wouldn't have been safe if she had had to take it off, and so Jesus didn't make her. He loved her anyway. So there's your moral ambiguity. Is that mask a good thing? It saved her life. Is the mask a bad thing? It prohibits her from being her true self. We smile. But, O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet. Long the mile, but let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Masks are culturally relevant in the United States of America. They have been for a few years now. Masks, you remember 47 years ago when COVID was around? Masks became a symbol of just how deeply divided our nation was. Like, science said you should wear a mask. And a whole big group of our neighbors said, nah, it's uncomfortable. And interestingly enough, what you thought about wearing a face mask during a global pandemic was indicative of how you had voted in the previous election. Isn't that something? Huh. And of course, fast forward to today, it's no longer the oppressed that have to wear masks, and the oppressor goes as themselves, because now ICE is detaining people on the street, and they are wearing masks as they do so. In the very same way that the slave hunters hunted for escaped slaves a couple of generations ago. Moral ambiguity. Sermons are not supposed to end with moral ambiguity. There's supposed to be good news at the end of them. Sermons are supposed to end with some kind of, well, how should we respond? What should we do with this contemplation? What's the Christ-like response here? Well, maybe the Christ-like response is to understand that everyone you meet is going to be wearing some kind of a mask. Don't ask them to take it off, especially if they don't feel safe to do so. Simply love the person that they are, mask and all. And what might we learn from Sarah, from our neighbor, the Samaritan woman at the well? Well, maybe we learn that you are in charge of the mask that you wear. That as sad as it is, people are going to judge you. The world is going to look at you a certain way. But you choose what you allow them to see, knowing that Christ loves you anyway, mask and all. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.